Members will now go to the next item on our agenda, and that takes us past public input to local board input. We've had one request, and that is from the Ōrākei local board, and it relates to the enabling housing supply bill that was announced recently. And we have with us representing Ōrākei local board, the chair, Scott Milne, and member Troy Churton. And so Scott and Troy, I now hand to you for your presentation. Welcome to the committee.
Chair Darby, thank you so much for giving us time this morning, and we do appreciate how tight this agenda is. Kalinda, can I just confirm, do all the council members have our paper, or can you put it on the screen for us?
Yes, it is available on Nexus, and we can shortly bring it up on the screen.
That would be great. Just while we do that, in an effort to save time, we'll begin our presentation. Councillors, we want to be brief in terms of referring to this paper to allow you plenty of time for questioning. Our premise is that this bill is not fit for purpose, that the outcome of this bill will be negative impacts far in excess of the positive ones, and that instead we need to be concentrating on building infrastructure for our city. And the reason we say this is to refute the government's comments in its opening statement or its fact sheet, which says that this will improve housing supply. Now, if you concentrate on the supply side, yes, we may get more houses built, but if you want improved housing, then this bill will not do that. I will ask Board Member Churton to now take us through some of the key points that we wish to make on this. Troy.
So hopefully you can hear me. The guts of point one is simply that the existing unitary plan settings enable a supply of around 900,000 units. The demand projected by our experts is for almost 240,000, give or take a 15 or 20% margin. The existing planning settings for medium density provided for under the existing plan enable us to meet demand and exceed any greater demand. So we're in a really good position to supply the housing that the government wants us to. Scott?
Thank you, Troy. The opening statement from government says that the NPSUD is a powerful tool that removes overly restrictive planning rules. We contend that our current rules are not overly restricted, and as our paper and Troy have just said, the current rules do allow for substantial development. The second point we'd like to make is that the government believes that this will improve the affordability of housing supply. Councillors, you will recall the excellent presentations that we've had from Jacques Victor to this committee in May and June and again last month, where we saw the effects of this bill, and it is quite obvious from a common sense point of view that simply to allow greater building will not improve the affordability of housing. The affordability of housing depends on the market and the availability of borrowings to allow purchase of homes. Troy.
Yep, and this moves on to point three, Kalinda. So what the essence of point three is that the existing medium density settings are more than adequate, and in particular, when you break down the types of zoning that we currently have, and in particular the special character residential overlay areas, central areas such as Ōrākei actually provide for 85% in mixed housing, suburban and mixed housing, urban zoning already. That means for Ōrākei as an area, a central area, we already can enable medium housing density of around 3 stories or more on 85% of our residentially zoned land. That special character in Ōrākei is only around 9% of our residential land, and overall for the city, only 3.6% of residential land has a special character overlay. The point is that existing settings do not impede housing supply, and that if this bill is introduced to further incentivise taking away special character, the negative impacts will be disproportionate, because we have settings that permit supply even by retaining existing special character overlays. Scott?
Thanks, Troy. The fourth and final point that we want to make before questions is that to get a well-functioning urban environment, we need a more design-led approach. And again, I go back to that excellent work that Victor and officers did in presenting to us the sorts of developments we're already getting under our unitary plan. There were many gold stars there, but there were still many frowny red faces, as you remember. And if we allow this bill to come in, we will have so many frowny faces that our city will be ruined. The fact sheet from government says also, after listing the things that will be allowed, like height up to 11 metres, 60-degree pitch rather than 40, setbacks a metre from all boundaries, not just the northern boundary. And then the government has the audacity to say, alternatively, developers may apply for a resource consent to undertake activities that are not permitted by these standards. I think the word standards is an ironic use of the word there. The other point we would make is that this bill is intended for Tier 1 councillors and is treating Auckland the same as it is Wellington, Tauranga and Christchurch. And unfortunately, a one-size-fits-all bill for something this serious just doesn't work. Troy?
Yeah, look, just to wrap, really, you've said it, Scott, but essentially our argument started by saying this bill is not fit for purpose, that we can actually achieve what the central government mandate drive is with the existing NPS as proposed and our existing legislative settings as proposed. We had a map attached that was really just to visually, there's no need to bring it up, Kalinda, that just showed the 85% or so of the Iraqi area that could enable 3-storey or more housing. And I think we're really up for questions, Scotty.
Yeah, I agree, buddy. Let's back to you, board chair. Committee chair.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Troy. We'll take questions. First up, I've got Councillor Simpson. Councillor Simpson, with your question, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And can I just note that I'd like to move the thanks around this when it comes to that point. So my first question is to either Troy or Scott. In your opinion, is it true that the Auckland Unitary Plan favoured development at the urban fringe and that this bill attempts to actually address that?
Yeah, can I jump on that one, Scott?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, what really concerned me in the bundle of documents that I saw supporting this was the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, which suggested that the unitary plan was favouring development in the urban fringes, and I think that may be a bit of what's behind this bill, thinking that this bill will enable greater concentrations of intensification at the centre of Auckland. Our view is that that's very misguided, and actually we think the PricewaterhouseCoopers report, the cost-benefit report's fundamentally wrong in that regard. The data and the evidence that we've presented today and that's been presented to the Your Committee on a couple of times now shows that the central area, in particular Ōrākei, has greater than average volumes of medium housing, suburban and urban land zonings to enable greater than average supply, and that the national policy statement, as you all know, enables greater intensification around central nodes and transport links throughout the city, not just the central CBD sort of concentric area of the city. So when you think that through, it would be our view that the bill is even more unfit for purpose if it is trying to concentrate greater amounts of development in the inner city, and you think PricewaterhouseCoopers report is correct, thinking that the unitary plan favours fringe development, because what will happen, and is actually happening already, is that developers are obviously favouring yield-driven developments in areas where they can obviously make a profit. And it's more than likely that you'll see developers choose to do developments in areas where they can make a greater gain from their development. And you may well end up finding that some of the fringe areas that PricewaterhouseCoopers suggests are favoured actually miss out. So I'm thinking of your Manuruwas and those areas may miss out on the supply of intensification and affordable housing that this bill allegedly facilitates. Scotty, I don't know if you want to add.
No, that well answered it, and nothing more to add.
Thank you. Chris, are you still there, Mr. Chairman?
I am still here. I'm just, Councillor Bartley, are you with us? Could you take over the chair, please? I need to relocate due to a conflict.
No, the reason I say, Mr. Chairman, my question is to you as chair of this committee. So I will hold.
I'm just going to pass to Councillor Bartley. She's acknowledged. Councillor Bartley, you can take over now.
Sure. I'll ask the question.
Thank you. I'll be back in 5 minutes.
I'll ask the question to Councillor Bartley, but if I have to ask it again when the chair comes back, I will. My question is, look, the local board have put a lot of evidence-based reasoning into their submission that they spoke to us about today. And my question to the chair of this committee is it able to be included in our submission that we send through?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Simpson. I'm going to pass to Megan because I'm guessing that's a operational thing, but I'm assuming all local board input is going to be included in our submission. But Megan, could you jump in, please?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Sure. So look, yes, we've already seen it, Councillor Simpson, and so we're already considering it as part of the work that we're doing about what the submission's going to look like. And we'll do a bit of a presentation to you at the next item, and you will see that there is certainly some alignment with what the Ōrākei Local Board has said and what we are broadly looking at in terms of implications. So I can say yes on that regard. In terms of the actual document itself, we can certainly, if there are any formal resolutions, and I have to admit, I'm sorry, I can't recall whether these were resolutions, I think they might have been, from the board, we will absolutely append those to any submission. If they are less formal like that, we'll consider it as part of our work and include that for the consideration of the subcommittee, the members of the committee who we're asking to delegate authority to confirm the submission. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, look, it does. What I would say is I'll wait for the item, but if I need to, I will be putting up a resolution to include the full attachment from the Ōrākei Local Board as part of our submission. So I just sort of foreshadow that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Yep.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Okay, thank you. And okay, so we have questions, is that right? These are the questions for the local board. So a question from, oh sorry, what's that, Kalinda?
No, sorry, I was just going to say we've got Councillor Newman, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Walker and Councillor Fletcher.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Walker first and then your summary of who's wanting to ask questions, but okay, we'll go with Councillor Simpson.
Madam Chair, I've asked my questions.
Councillor Newman.
Oh, thank you, Madam Deputy Chair, and look, thank you to the board for its expressed concerns about the need to increase supply of affordable housing in Manurewa. That's interesting. I have two questions, if I may. The first question is, should I conclude that the primary concern that the board has is that if the bill is passed and enacted, that it would effectively remove special character overlay heritage protections where such heritage protections currently apply? That's my first question. Have I surmised correctly?
No. So it's no. The primary conclusion you can draw, I suggest, Daniel, is that this bill is unfit for purpose because it seeks to enable councils to supply something that councils can actually already do.
Yes, the query that I'm wanting to know is that it supplies in certain locations but not in others. So would it be fair to say that the mandate for increased housing supply can be achieved without the bill, and therefore we can retain the heritage overlay? That's the question.
Oh, that's true. There's no doubt.
Yes.
There's no doubt the mandate for housing supply can be met under current settings, inclusive of special character zones, special character overlays.
And is it worth noting that the heritage overlays do not apply in every part of Auckland? So the proposition is that the heritage overlay is good for certain postcodes, but it's not applicable in other postcodes where the heritage overlay is not applied. Is that fair?
Well, it's sort of an unusual parallel statement. I don't think it's part of this discussion. In talking to officers, the effect on the amount of housing that could be made available without a heritage overlay is so insignificant in the global terms of the amount of supply as to be irrelevant.
It doesn't really matter where. As I said, less than 5% of all of Auckland has a special character overlay. If you're interested in the special character of Auckland, then you're interested in the special character overlay, whether it's predominantly located in Huia or Hibiscus Coast or wherever.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott and Troy. Look forward to the discussion later on.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you, Councillor Newman. I will now go to the next question, and I believe that is from Councillor Henderson. Councillor Henderson.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions. So I also read the PwC Sense Partners independent report with great interest preparing for this meeting, and I'll just put a couple of statements in that report to you for the board's opinion. So in the opinion of the Ōrākei Local Board, will this bill result in a more compact, socially equitable urban form in the future for Auckland?
Well, I probably have a more strident view than Troy. I think this bill will see the uglification of Auckland.
Yeah,
I'd agree. I absolutely agree. Will it result in more compact? It will result in less design-led, more negative urban design outcomes than positive outcomes. Yes, compact is relative. Compact, which delivers on the outcome of good urban design, is completely different.
Hence the point that we made in point 4, and the point that's been made by our officers really well. We simply have to do better with design-led implementation of the unitary plan.
Yeah. And I'd like, yeah, you're right, Scotty, and just reflecting on social equity, and God help us. But like I said, I think during my part of the presentation, one of the risks of this bill is actually it will lead to social inequity. Because if you are intent, as PricewaterhouseCoopers is, on selling the idea that somehow the existing urban unitary plan favours intensification in fringe areas, what you're doing by pushing this bill through is saying, right, well, we're going to concentrate on development in areas of known high net land value, where it's more likely that we'll be able to achieve housing at a certain cost. And if anything, the people who are already struggling to enter a housing market or move around in it will be further denied. It's not appropriate to have a one-size-fits-all planning approach to housing intensification.
Thank you.
Thanks, Troy.
Sorry, one more question, Chair, if I may.
Yes, Councillor Henderson.
The board brought up the issue of special character zones, and I wanted to check, is it true to say that special character zones have the best access to jobs and public transport in Auckland?
Is it true to what?
Is it true that generally special character zones in the city have the best access to jobs and public transport relative to other zones?
Well, first, let's remember that special characters aren't zones, they're overlays. All right, there are special character areas which are predominantly in single house zone areas, and there aren't many of them. And there are special character overlays which affect mixed housing suburban and mixed housing urban, and very little of it, mind you. And they are widespread across Auckland. I think the highest area of special character overlay may be in Eden Albert from memory. I have the spreadsheet somewhere. But every one of our 20-odd ward areas has very little special character overlay. So I don't think you can draw any conclusions about special character overlays and your question to do with transport nodes. Certainly in Oraki, Shane, there are some special character overlay areas very close to our railway stations, which pose great concern. Fortunately, they have volcanic landscapes and things next to them, and by jingoes, let's hope they meet the qualifying matter credentials under the National Policy Statement.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Thanks, Troy and Scott. We'll now go to then Councillor Fletcher for their questions, please. Councillor Fletcher first.
Thank you. To a degree, my question has been answered, but it was around unintended social inequities resulting from enabling the housing supply and other matters legislation. Troy has already spoken to that, but is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Back to you, Troy.
I mean, Scott made the point about affordability, and you know, there was a really strong presentation by Jacques, I think, to this planning committee that reminded us that you know, improving medium densification rules actually isn't going to do anything for social equity, anything more than what we've currently got. There are a range of factors that go into social equity, and I personally, and I think that you know, we can lose sight of what the intent of this legislation is if we concentrate on social equity too much. Scott, do you have some concept of affordability?
Look, Councillor Fletcher, you're absolutely right that it is a factor we should consider, but there are numerous factors that we should consider. Social equity is a priority. The shape and livability of our city is a priority. Habitability, all of these things which will be changed if this bill is implemented. The very fact that any existing plan changes or proposed plan changes that are in train at the moment, they will have to be reviewed and may well be taken out. We're basically having the ability to control our own destiny completely taken away from us. And I keep going back to those pictures of smiley faces and frowny faces. We're not doing that badly. And the current unitary plan does allow for substantial densification across our whole city. And yes, we can do better from the planning point of view, but we do not need to go back to a scorched earth policy and just build Soviet-style blocks across our city.
It is very disempowering, it seems. Scott, would you just like to comment, because the agenda item is coming up, the amount of work that you have done as a local board on this is really important and inspiring. On those that we delegate the task of preparing this submission, do you think there should be representation from local board?
Councillor Fletcher, I've had more comment from my fellow board chairs on this issue than any other in my short term. So yes, I think there's a deep feeling across the city about this bill. I would also say that our officers, and I mean our own local board officers and the governing body officers, have been unbelievably fantastic and have worked jolly hard on this submission, because we've had to come up to speed too. There's a lot of jargon in here. It is complex, and I cannot thank our officers highly enough for the work they've done, and also for their passion And believe me, councillors, when we get officers and councillors pulling in the same direction, we must be right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Good to hear that confirmation of the engagement of our staff with the boards. Appreciate that, Scott. Thanks, Councillor Fletcher. I will now go to Councillor Walker, and I did get the order wrong there, Councillor Walker. My apology. Your question, Councillor Walker.
I'll accept your apology, and I'll just make the assumption that I've got something up my sleeve now, Mr. Chair. So a couple of questions. A commendation first, Scott and Troy. Excellent work. And my question is around taking things a step further to inform our submission. And the first part of that question is around affordability. It would be useful to have some further work done that might emphasise, as you point out, that prices are led by the market, that the market will determine the cost of the land and the site according to the development potential of that site. So what follows from that is a likely scenario similar to what we had from the special housing legislation, where the special housing legislation actually promoted a hive of speculation activity that drove up the price of land and drove up the price of development. So I've got a question around that. You just answer my second question after this, but around some further work. The other question I've got goes to uglification, which I think is a very useful expression. And that is around whether you might do some work as it applies to Aoraki, projecting circumstances where, because of the ability to build close to the boundary and to build high, we're likely to see more concrete structures that are less carbon friendly, likely to be very, very ugly and difficult to live next to. So have you given thought as to what this future for Aoraki looks like? One, in terms of escalating prices, reduced affordability, and two, uglification of a high order. Thank you.
Can I jump in, Scott? So, Wayne, yes, we've given thought not just for Aoraki but for Auckland across the whole region, because the underlying instrument here is a blunt, one-size-fits-all approach to medium density for all of Auckland. But obviously, we can speak on behalf of our constituents in our area. But this is, we're not just gazing at our own navels here. The issue you raised about affordability was covered in a series of, I think, at least 8 slides by Jacques during the presentations to the Planning Committee in May and in June. And that sets out extensively some data-driven and evidence-backed research on affordability and the effect of the proposed medium density under this bill. So, yes, we've referred to that. The Planning Committee has that information. It should form part of the submission going forward, which hopefully supports our view that this bill should not go through and it's not fit for purpose. Uglification, Scotty, do you want to talk about that?
Well, I guess, Troy and Wayne, my closing statements were going to be blunt. You used the word. Councillors, I think you've been dealt a blunt tool that has come from blunt advice at central government to an overly busy government. And we do not want to be the council that oversaw the uglification of the city.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you, Councillor Walker, for those questions and the replies there from Scott and Troy. Troy and Scott, thank you. You've really applied yourself to this. I know it's taken up quite a bit of time. It's taking up a lot of time from our staff at the moment. We don't have much time, though. We've got 12 days from today to pull all the teams together, all the threads, and make a contribution to maybe reshaping this as best we can, this particular bill. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Troy. Now, Councillor Desley Simpson, you have moved accordingly. Can I have a second, please?
I've put my hand up for that, Fletcher.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. It's moved and seconded, and that's the motion expressing appreciation to the Ōrākei Local Board, and particularly Scott and Troy. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no.
No.
And declare that carried. Thank you both. Members.
Thank you,
Thank you, Scott.